The harsh fluorescent lights of the supermarket typically induce a sense of hurried anonymity, a silent agreement amongst shoppers to navigate their carts and lists with minimal interaction. But on this particular Tuesday afternoon, the hushed cacophony of rustling bags and squeaking wheels was abruptly punctuated by a small, trembling sigh. I was waiting patiently in line, my own basket holding little more than a forgotten impulse buy, when I noticed her, Mrs. Eleanor Vance, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, stood before the cashier, her shoulders slightly stooped under an invisible weight. Her hands, gnarled with age, fumbled with a worn purse, extracting a collection of small bills and change that she painstakingly arranged on the conveyor belt. Her basket, otherwise modest, contained 2 large brown paper bags laden with what looked like essentials, and perched precariously on top, a small, brightly frosted birthday cake adorned with tiny pink roses. It looked like the kind of cake a grandmother would buy for a grandchild, full of love and a touch of nostalgic whimsy. "That'll be $187.42, ma'am," the cashier stated, her voice devoid of inflection, her eyes already scanning the next customer. Mrs. Vance's frail fingers paused, trembling slightly as she counted out her meager offering. She pushed forward a crumpled $10 bill, then a collection of 5s and 1s, then a scattering of quarters and dimes, her brow furrowed with concentration, her lips moving silently as she tallied. The cashier, a young man with a name tag identifying him as Kevin, tapped his fingers impatiently on the register. Mrs. Vance looked up, her blue eyes, faded but still sharp, meeting his. "Oh dear," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the store's muzak. I seem to be a bit short," breathed, her voice cracking. "Oh, bless your heart, young man." Her hands, still trembling, came up to cover her mouth. A single tear, then another, traced paths down the weathered landscape of her cheeks. I don't know what to say." "There's no need to say anything, Mrs. Vance," I responded softly, a warmth spreading through my chest, a feeling I was beginning to recognize as the purest form of satisfaction. But she wasn't done. She took a tentative step closer, her eyes welling up again. "My granddaughter. It's her 7th birthday tomorrow. This cake means the world to her, and my medicine, I thought." She trailed off, unable to articulate the depth of her relief. She reached out, her frail hand touching my arm with a feather-light touch. Her touch, so gentle, conveyed a profound gratitude that no words could fully express. "God bless you," she whispered again, her voice thick with emotion, shaking with sincerity. It was less a casual farewell and more a heartfelt prayer, delivered with an intensity that made the hair on my arms stand up. I offered her another smile, reaching out briefly to squeeze her arm, a silent acknowledgement of the connection we had just forged in that sterile aisle. "You have a wonderful day, Mrs. Vance, and tell your granddaughter I hope she has the happiest of birthdays." As Kevin handed her the receipt and her carefully bagged groceries, she still seemed to be in a daze, her eyes still brimming. She clutched the bags to her chest, the little pink rose cake now a symbol of unexpected grace. She turned to me one last time, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. Instead, she just offered a small, wobbly smile, a radiant expression of pure, overwhelming gratitude. weary sound that implied this wasn't an uncommon occurrence. "How much short are we, ma'am?" he asked, not unkindly, but with a palpable sense of resignation. Mrs. Vance pulled out a small, worn leather wallet, its contents even sparser than her purse. She counted again, her movements slow and deliberate. A blush crept up her neck. I believe I'm about $23 short, Kevin." Her gaze fell upon the birthday cake, and a flicker of deep sadness crossed her face. Perhaps I could put back a few things." Her voice hitched on the last word. My heart constricted. I imagined the little girl eagerly anticipating her pink rose cake, the disappointment etched on Mrs. Vance's face, speaking volumes about a love that stretched beyond just groceries. Without a moment's hesitation, I stepped forward. "Excuse me," I said, my voice cutting through the quiet tension at the register. Kevin and Mrs. Vance both looked up, surprised. "Please," I continued, addressing Kevin, "add her bill to mine." I pushed my basket forward slightly, indicating my intent. Kevin blinked, momentarily flustered. "Are you sure, sir?" he asked, glancing between me and Mrs. Vance, who now looked thoroughly bewildered. "Quite sure," I affirmed, my gaze meeting Mrs. Vance's briefly, offering a reassuring, gentle smile. Her eyes, wide and a little cloudy, searched mine, trying to decipher this sudden intervention. There was confusion, then a hint of suspicion, a lifetime of navigating a harsh world, making her wary of unexpected generosity. "Oh no, young man, you don't have to do that," she protested, her voice regaining some of its strength, tinged with a grandmotherly pride. "I'll manage. I can just put back the aspirin and perhaps the special bread. I can make do with the regular." She gestured meekly at her 2 bags, clearly pointing to items that were more medically necessary than luxury. "Nonsense," I insisted, my smile unwavering. "It's my pleasure. Consider it a small act of kindness." I met Kevin's eyes again, conveying an unspoken message. "Just do it." He seemed to understand, a slight nod indicating his compliance. He rapidly scanned my single item, then typed in the new combined total. As he did, I noticed the large plastic containers in Mrs. Vance's bags that I hadn't seen before. Prescription medications, dozens of them, likely the reason for the surprisingly large bill despite her otherwise thrifty purchases. The $23 wasn't just for a cake or specialty bread. It was for vital medicine she couldn't afford. The realization pierced me, solidifying my conviction. This wasn't just about a cake. It was about dignity and basic necessities. When Kevin announced the final combined sum, I presented my card without ceremony. As the transaction processed, Mrs. Vance stood beside me, her confusion slowly giving way to something else. Her gaze was fixed on my hands as I put my card back in my wallet. Then her eyes rose to mine again, and this time they were glistening. She didn't speak for a long moment, simply staring, as if trying to commit my face to memory. "Oh, dear Lord," she finally. I watched her slowly shuffle away, her steps a little lighter than before, disappearing down the automatic doors and into the bright afternoon sun. As I finally took my own paltry purchase and stepped out, the sterile supermarket environment seemed to melt away. The brief encounter had left an indelible mark. A quiet warmth pooled in my chest, a profound sense of purpose. And though I tried to maintain a composed exterior, a single unbidden tear, warm and surprisingly heavy, indeed formed in the corner of my eye. It was then, seeing the genuine, raw relief and joy on Mrs. Vance's face, that I knew with absolute certainty that this journey was not only worthwhile, but absolutely essential. This was just the beginning. That singular, poignant moment with Mrs. Vance was far more than a simple transaction. It was a powerful echo of a conviction that had been slowly but steadily building within me, a conviction that had already set in motion the audacious plan to spend $1 million on random acts of kindness. This wasn't a sudden, whimsical decision, but rather the culmination of years of observation, reflection, and a deep-seated desire to confront what often felt like an overwhelming tide of cynicism and despair in the world. I had achieved a level of financial success that afforded me comfort, but as often happens with material gains, I found myself increasingly questioning its true meaning and purpose. There is a peculiar hollowness that can accompany wealth if it is not anchored to something greater than self. I witnessed growing divisions, the relentless negativity in news cycles, and the erosion of trust and community spirit. It felt as though compassion was becoming a commodity, a performance rather than a genuine human impulse. I realized that while large-scale philanthropy certainly had its place, there was a profound absence of spontaneous, personal generosity, the kind that could surprise someone on their worst day and remind them that they are seen, valued, and not alone. The genesis of the $1,000 or $1,000 kindness project truly began with a stark recognition that genuine, unsolicited kindness possesses an almost alchemical power. It can transform a moment, alter a perspective, and even in its quiet amplification, begin to mend the frayed edges of society. I started with smaller acts, almost experimentally, paying for a stranger's coffee, leaving an unexpectedly large tip for an overworked server, donating anonymously to a local food bank. Each instance, no matter how small, sparked a disarming sense of joy, not just in the recipient, but profoundly within myself. It was an antidote to the very cynicism I was observing, a direct counter-narrative to the idea that people are inherently self-serving, or that the world is a cold, indifferent place. This self-discovery led me to ponder, what if this impulse could be magnified? What if someone deliberately, strategically, and substantially invested in these moments of human connection? The $1 million figure wasn't pulled from thin air. It was a sum I meticulously calculated, a significant portion of my accumulated wealth that I felt I could responsibly allocate without jeopardizing my own financial security, yet substantial enough to make a truly measurable impact. This wasn't about seeking recognition or tax breaks. It was about a direct deployment of resources to foster human flourishing. The financial planning involved far more than simply earmarking the money. It required establishing a separate fund, understanding the logistics of various types of donations, and even consulting with financial advisors who, initially, looked at me with a mixture of bewilderment and admiration. "Are you sure you want to do this to this extent?" one asked almost hesitantly. My answer was always an unequivocal yes. This was not an investment for monetary return, but an investment in humanity itself. The personal commitment behind this undertaking was immense. It demanded time, emotional energy, and a willingness to step outside my comfort zone. It meant actively seeking out opportunities for kindness, being present and observant in a world that often encourages us to be cloistered and distracted. There were initial doubts, of course. Would it be perceived as performative? Would people misunderstand my intentions? Would I even be able to find enough genuine opportunities to disperse such a large sum meaningfully? These anxieties were real, but they were consistently overshadowed by the core belief in the project's inherent value. I wasn't trying to solve world hunger, nor was I under the illusion that $1 million could fundamentally change systemic issues overnight. The why was far more nuanced, and I believed equally crucial: to ignite sparks of hope, to demonstrate that generosity still thrives, and to create ripple effects that would extend far beyond the immediate act. My philosophy was simple: intentional acts of generosity, particularly those that are unexpected and unconditional, possess a unique power to combat the isolation and cynicism that permeate modern life. By actively seeking out moments to uplift and support others, I aimed to not only provide immediate relief or joy, but also to subtly shift perspectives, both for the givers should my story inspire them, and for the receivers. It was about fostering a sense of community, reminding people that connection and compassion are intrinsically human. I wanted to show that even in a world that often feels fractured, there are quiet, powerful forces of good at work. This venture was, in essence, a grand experiment in demonstrating the transformative power of empathy, scaled to a level where its impact could be widely seen and hopefully replicated. This project was my way of articulating a hope for a more connected, compassionate world, one act of kindness at a time. And as Mrs. Vance's tear-filled "God bless you" underscored, the journey had only just begun. The profound impact of Mrs. Vance's gratitude and the self-renewing energy it sparked confirmed that this audacious project was not only feasible, but deeply necessary. It propelled me forward, seeking out opportunities to deploy this allocated $1 million in ways that might create similar, indelible moments of connection and hope. What followed was a series of encounters, each unique, yet all woven with the common thread of unexpected generosity and its remarkable capacity to transform lives. These weren't grand public declarations, but often quiet interventions, meticulously planned to offer maximum impact while preserving the dignity and sometimes the anonymity of the recipients. One such instance involved a bright young woman named Chloe, a senior at a local university, just weeks away from graduation. I had learned about her through an informal network I'd cultivated, a group of community liaisons and university faculty who were aware of my discreet philanthropic interests. Chloe was a first-generation college student working 2 part-time jobs to support herself and occasionally send money home to her family. Her academic record was stellar, a testament to her fierce determination and intellect. However, a sudden, unforeseen medical expense for her younger sibling had left her with a crushing tuition balance of just over $7,000, rendering her ineligible to receive her diploma even after completing all her coursework. The university, while sympathetic, had been unyielding in its policy. Chloe was at her wit's end, contemplating dropping out days before graduation, abandoning years of hard work and sacrificing dreams that were almost within her grasp. The thought of all that effort, all that sacrifice being negated by a sum that to her felt insurmountable was heartbreaking. I contacted the university's financial aid office anonymously, expressing a desire to assist a student in need. After some careful negotiation and verification of Chloe's situation, without revealing her identity to me, I arranged for the full outstanding balance to be paid directly to the university. The communication I received from the financial aid officer a few days later was brief but powerful. The student has been notified. She is in utter disbelief, utterly overcome. Thank you. I saw Chloe in her cap and gown, her face radiant with a joy that transcended the standard celebratory cheer. There were no tears of sadness, only tears of overwhelming relief and elation. I watched her hug her family, holding her diploma tight, a symbol not just of academic achievement, but of a future suddenly unburdened. The quiet knowledge that I had played a part in lifting that immense weight, in ensuring her years of arduous effort culminated in triumph rather than despair, was a feeling more potent than any financial gain. It solidified my belief that sometimes the most strategic kindness isn't just about giving money, but about removing unseen barriers that prevent deserving individuals from reaching their full potential. It wasn't about the $7,000. It was about the lifetime of opportunity that $7,000 unlocked. My focus wasn't solely on human individuals. The ripple effect of kindness, I'd come to believe, extended to all sentient beings. My second story involves a local animal shelter, Positive Haven, a small, independently run sanctuary dedicated to rescuing, rehabilitating, and rehoming abandoned and abused animals. I had read an article about their perpetual struggle to cover emergency medical costs, a sudden surge in parvo cases, a series of complex surgeries for neglected animals. Their emergency fund was chronically depleted, forcing them into difficult decisions about which animals they could afford to save. The shelter director, Sarah, was famously passionate, but perpetually stressed, her voice etched with the weight of responsibility. I decided to make an anonymous donation of $50,000, specifically earmarked for their emergency medical fund. This wasn't a one-time gesture for a single animal, but a substantial injection of capital designed to provide a cushion, allowing them to say yes to critical medical interventions without crippling their operational budget. The donation was made through a third-party solicitor to ensure my anonymity. The impact was almost immediate. Within weeks, the Shelter AS social media was brimming with success stories. A three-legged cat named Lucky receiving life-saving surgery, a litter of puppies overcoming distemper thanks to intensive veterinary care, an abused dog once terrified and withdrawn undergoing expensive rehabilitation and finding a loving home. The jubilant posts from the shelter staff detailing the animals' recoveries and adoptions were deeply moving. I observed from afar, seeing not just the saved lives of animals, but the palpable relief and renewed hope in the eyes of the shelter volunteers and staff. This act of kindness wasn't about a direct personal interaction, but about empowering a dedicated group of individuals to continue their vital work, extending compassion to those who often have no voice. The $50,000 had translated into countless wagging tails, purring companions, and the unwavering dedication of those who nurse them back to health, creating a sanctuary of hope in a world often harsh to the vulnerable. The third narrative, and perhaps one of the most logistically complex, but ultimately rewarding, centered on Maria Rodriguez, a single mother of two young children, aged 5 and 8. Maria had recently lost her job as a head chef when the restaurant she worked for abruptly closed its doors. Her husband had passed away 2 years prior after a protracted illness, leaving her as the sole provider. Her small, rented home, while a roof over their heads, was in a significant state of disrepair. A leaky roof had led to mold in one of the children's bedrooms. The aging furnace was unreliable, and the kitchen, her former domain, was barely functional. The thought of trying to find a new job while managing these escalating household crises, all on a rapidly dwindling unemployment check, was overwhelming her. Her pride, however, prevented her from asking for help. Again, leveraging my network, I learned of Maria's plight. Her children's school counselor, acutely aware of the family's struggles, mentioned Maria's quiet dignity and her desperate need. I realized this was an opportunity not just for financial aid, but for community engagement. I orchestrated a surprise home renovation. This required meticulous planning, stealth, and the recruitment of a small army of volunteers. I funded the materials: new roofing, a modern furnace, kitchen appliances, fresh paint, and even some new, child-friendly furniture. But crucially, I rallied a team of local contractors, friends, and skilled neighbors to donate their time and expertise. Electricians, plumbers, carpenters, and painters, all touched by Maria's story, agreed to participate, operating under the guise of a community improvement project that was temporarily clearing other homes in the area for upcoming city work. Maria was told her home would need to be vacated for a weekend for inspection and basic safety updates. A plausible story concocted to get her and her children out of the house. The transformation was incredible. Over 3 intense days, Maria's dilapidated house was reborn. The mold was eradicated, the roof repaired, the furnace replaced, and her kitchen transformed into a bright, functional space. The children's rooms were given cheerful new paint and safe, comfortable beds. We installed energy-efficient windows and updated plumbing. The community volunteers worked tirelessly, sharing meals, laughter, and a profound sense of shared purpose. The culmination was the reveal. Maria and her children returned to their home, initially bewildered by the fresh scent of paint and wood, then slowly, with dawning realization, understanding the magnitude of what had transpired. Maria's reaction was perhaps the most visceral I had witnessed. She walked through each room, her hand clasped over her mouth, tears streaming silently down her face. She touched the new countertop, ran her fingers over the freshly painted walls, and inhaled deeply in her children's bedrooms. When she saw the pristine new furnace, her shoulders visibly relaxed, shedding a burden I hadn't fully grasped until that moment: the fear of cold nights, of unreliable heat. Her children, initially shy, squealed with delight, exploring their new spaces, their excitement infectious. Maria turned to us, the assembled anonymous group of volunteers, her voice choked with emotion. I don't know who did this. I don't know how to thank you, she whispered, her eyes brimming with a mixture of disbelief and profound gratitude. This isn't just a house. It's a new beginning. You've given us our home back. We explained it was a community effort, preferring to keep the specific origin of the funding vague. The joyful reveal was a powerful affirmation of not just the financial aid, but the strength of community, the healing power of collective goodwill. Observing Maria holding her children close, safe and warm in their revitalized home, a home that now felt like a true sanctuary against the world's uncertainties, filled me with an indescribable sense of fulfillment. It was a tangible manifestation of hope, proving that generosity could take many forms, from removing financial barriers for a student to providing a renewed sense of security and dignity for a struggling family. Each story, distinct in its circumstances, underscored the versatile impact of intentional kindness and further fueled my commitment to this extraordinary journey. The emotional resonance of these individual acts, from Mrs. Vance's tearful gratitude to Chloe's triumphant graduation and Maria's revitalized home, prepared me for what would become the most significant undertaking of my journey, a comprehensive act of kindness designed not just to alleviate immediate suffering, but to foster long-term recovery and resilience for an entire community. This was not a swift intervention or a targeted individual gesture, but a deep, sustained commitment, requiring meticulous planning, genuine partnership, and a substantial portion of my remaining kindness fund. My extensive research had led me to the small, coastal town of Havenwood, a community of roughly 2,500 souls that had been utterly devastated by a Category 4 hurricane 18 months prior. The news cycle had long since moved on, but Havenwood remained trapped in a cycle of despair. Federal aid had been insufficient. Insurance claims were bogged down by bureaucratic red tape, and the vibrant fishing and tourism industries, once the lifeblood of the town, lay in ruins. Homes were still uninhabitable, businesses shuttered, and the fundamental infrastructure, roads, power grids, water treatment plants, remained precariously fragile. The collective spirit, once fiercely independent, was fracturing under the relentless weight of uncertainty and neglect. My initial visits to Havenwood were discreet. I arrived as an unassuming observer, listening to conversations in the temporary community center, walking through streets lined with boarded-up windows and piles of debris that somehow still remained. I spoke with local leaders, small business owners, and families still living in trailers or with relatives, all of whom shared a common thread, a profound fatigue and a desperate need for a lifeline, not just a handout. It became clear that what Havenwood needed wasn't a single donation, but a comprehensive, multifaceted fund that would address the systemic issues hamstringing their recovery. This was about investing in their future, not just patching up the past. The planning phase for what I privately termed the Havenwood Renewal Fund was extensive. It involved countless hours of consultation with engineers, urban planners, economic development specialists, and most importantly, the people of Havenwood themselves. I established a robust framework, ensuring that the fund would operate with transparency and accountability, managed by a specially appointed local committee. The goal was clearly defined: to provide long-term support for rebuilding homes and ensuring they were resilient against future storms, to revitalize businesses through grants and low-interest loans, creating new jobs and opportunities, and to repair and upgrade essential infrastructure, restoring the very sinews of the community. This wasn't merely about writing a check. It was about empowering Havenwood to rebuild itself, according to its own vision and needs. I committed a staggering $500,000 from my fund, understanding that this would be the most impactful allocation yet, requiring not just financial capital, but also intellectual and emotional investment. the decision was made to announce the Havenwood Renewal Fund at a town hall meeting, one that I wanted to feel less like a formal presentation and more like a community gathering. I worked closely with Mayor Thompson, a weary but determined local leader, to organize the event. Word spread quickly through the small town, drawing out residents who were more accustomed to promises unfulfilled than genuine hope. The makeshift community center, a tent still exhibiting signs of hurricane damage, was packed to capacity, standing room only. The air was thick with a mixture of skepticism, curiosity, and a deep, almost palpable yearning for something good to happen. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it brief, concise, and heartfelt. I didn't introduce myself with grand titles or personal accolades, but simply as an individual who believed in the power of community and the resilience of the human spirit. I explained the purpose of the Havenwood Renewal Fund, detailing its 3 core pillars: housing, business, and infrastructure. I detailed how the funds would be allocated, emphasizing local control and decision-making, ensuring that the town's existing leaders and citizens would be the primary architects of their own recovery. I spoke of Havenwood's unique history, its enduring strength, and the certainty that, with a renewed foundation, it would not just recover, but flourish again. A hush fell over the crowd as I spoke, their faces ranging from cautious optimism to outright bewilderment. Then, as the details of the comprehensive support sank in, the long-term commitment, the focus on sustainable rebuilding, the sheer magnitude of the financial lifeline, a ripple of understanding spread. Mayor Thompson, standing beside me, cleared his throat, his voice thick with emotion, as he officially introduced the fund and reiterated my commitment. It was then that the dam broke. A single sob echoed from the back of the room, quickly followed by another, and then a chorus of choked cries. The initial shock gave way to raw, collective relief. Faces previously etched with worry and hardship softened and crumpled as tears streamed freely. Men and women, young and old, embraced each other, their shoulders shaking with emotion. I watched as a fisherman, his hands calloused and rough from years at sea, openly wept, his face buried in his wife's shoulder. A young mother clutched her child tighter, a look of pure, unadulterated hope washing over her features for the first time in what felt like years. The applause, when it finally erupted, was deafening, a roaring crescendo of gratitude and renewed purpose. It wasn't polite or perfunctory. It was a primal outpouring of an entire community that had for so long felt abandoned and forgotten. People began to surge forward, not in a chaotic rush, but with a reverent energy, extending hands, offering heartfelt thanks that needed no words. I felt myself enveloped in a sea of emotional embraces, each hug a silent testament to the suffering endured and the hope rekindled. One elderly woman, Mrs. Callahan, her eyes sparkling through a veil of tears, clasped my hands and squeezed them tightly. We thought no one cared anymore, she whispered, her voice reedy but clear. You've given us back our future. Her words, simple yet profound, encapsulated the sentiment of the entire room. In that moment, standing amidst the raw, collective outpouring of relief and the tears of rediscovered hope, I felt an indescribable sense of connection. This wasn't about being a remote benefactor. It was about being an integral part of Havenwood's journey towards renewal. The lines between giver and receiver blurred, replaced by a shared humanity. investment wasn't just in bricks and mortar, but in the collective psyche of a community, in their belief in a better tomorrow. This act, far more complex and far-reaching than any before, felt like the true culmination of my $1,000 project. It was a tangible demonstration of how intentional kindness, strategically deployed, could not only mend individual lives, but also catalyze the rebirth of an entire struggling town, transforming despair into a powerful, burgeoning hope. And as their applause and heartfelt thanks washed over me, I knew this massive investment of time, resources, and heart was the most meaningful thing I had ever done. The thunderous applause and the tear-streaked faces of Havenwood, etched with a renewed sense of purpose, marked not an end, but a profound turning point in this extraordinary journey. Having deployed a significant portion of my $1,000, I found myself reflecting on the path traversed, the diverse tapestry of faces and stories, and the undeniable transformation within myself. This was no longer just a project. It had become an odyssey of self-discovery, revealing unexpected challenges, dismantling ingrained misconceptions about giving, and ultimately forging a deeper, more empathetic understanding of the human condition. One of the most unexpected challenges was navigating the intricate dance between altruism and ego. In the beginning, there was a subtle, almost unconscious desire for validation, a quiet hope that these acts would somehow confirm my own inherent goodness. However, as the project progressed, especially with the larger, more anonymous acts, this initial inclination withered. The genuine satisfaction came not from external praise, but from witnessing the pure, unadulterated impact of these acts. Chloe's unburdened smile, the thriving animals at Positive Haven, Maria's children playing safely in their renovated home, and the collective sigh of relief in Havenwood. I learned that true generosity flourishes not in the spotlight, but in the quiet fulfillment of knowing you've made a tangible difference, often unseen and unacknowledged by the recipient. The challenge became one of maintaining that purity of intent, ensuring that the act itself remained the focus, not its perception. Another significant hurdle was confronting the various misconceptions about giving. Prior to this journey, I had a somewhat simplistic view. Money solves problems. While financial resources were undoubtedly crucial, especially in cases like Havenwood, I quickly discovered that genuine kindness extended far beyond monetary transactions. It encompassed time, empathy, active listening, and a willingness to understand the nuanced needs of each individual or community. For instance, with Maria, funding the renovation was one thing, but orchestrating the volunteer effort and creating that sense of community purpose was equally, if not more, impactful. It wasn't just about restoring her home. It was about restoring her faith in humanity. I learned that sometimes simply showing up, listening without judgment, and demonstrating unwavering support could be as valuable as any financial contribution. The project forced me to shed the misconception that wealth alone is the antidote to suffering. Rather, it's wealth coupled with wisdom, compassion, and a deeply human touch. My perspective on wealth underwent a radical transformation. Before, wealth was primarily a measure of security, a symbol of achievement, and a means to personal comfort and luxury. Now it had become a powerful tool, a resource to be strategically deployed for the greater good, the The satisfaction derived from watching my investments grow in a portfolio paled in comparison to the profound joy of seeing a community rebuild, a student thrive, or an elderly woman find renewed dignity. The true value of money, I realized, lay not in its accumulation, but in its strategic dissemination, its capacity to uplift, empower, and inspire. This shift wasn't about discarding my own financial security, but about reprioritizing its purpose, understanding that its highest utility could be found in collective flourishing. The irony was not lost on me. By giving away such a substantial sum, I felt richer in ways I had never anticipated. My assets were no longer confined to bank accounts, but extended to the well-being of others, creating a vastly more expansive and meaningful form of prosperity. The journey also profoundly altered my understanding of happiness. I had always pursued traditional markers of success, assuming that once achieved, they would unlock lasting contentment. While they did bring moments of fleeting satisfaction, it was in these acts of selfless giving that I discovered a deeper, more enduring form of happiness, one rooted in connection, purpose, and impact. Witnessing the ripple effects of kindness, seeing despair transform into hope, and playing a part in those transformations generated an unparalleled sense of fulfillment. It was a kind of happiness that wasn't dependent on external circumstances or material possessions, but rather an internal wellspring, constantly replenished by each new act of generosity. This wasn't about sacrificing my own happiness for others. It was discovering that my deepest happiness was inextricably linked to the well-being of the world around me. Perhaps the most significant personal growth I experienced was a profound expansion of empathy and human connection. Each interaction, each story uncovered, stretched my capacity to understand and relate to diverse experiences. From the quiet struggle of Mrs. Vance to the systemic challenges faced by an entire town, I was forced to step outside my own frame of reference and truly inhabit the perspectives of others. This wasn't always comfortable. Sometimes it was heartbreaking, revealing the often invisible struggles that people carry, but it was also incredibly enriching, fostering a deeper sense of interconnectedness with humanity. The project taught me that every individual, regardless of their circumstances, possesses inherent worth and deserves dignity and compassion. It dismantled preconceived notions and stereotypical judgments, replacing them with a nuanced appreciation for the complexities of life and the remarkable resilience of the human spirit. I stopped seeing people as abstract figures in news headlines and started seeing them as individuals with stories, dreams, and vulnerabilities, just like me. This fostered a sense of shared humanity that transcended differences, uniting me with strangers in powerful, unforeseen ways. Beyond the grand gestures, I learned invaluable lessons about the power of small acts of kindness. While the $1 Million Fund allowed for significant interventions, the cumulative effect of countless smaller, spontaneous acts was equally transformative, both for the recipients and for me. A kind word, a patient ear, a gesture of understanding. These seemingly insignificant actions often had a disproportionately positive impact, reminding me that generosity isn't solely about grand financial gestures, but about the consistent cultivation of a compassionate heart. These micro moments of connection reinforced the idea that kindness is a daily practice, an ongoing commitment to viewing the world through a lens of empathy and positive intent. They served as constant reminders that even without vast resources, anyone could and should contribute to the tapestry of human goodwill. Ultimately, the profound satisfaction that came from contributing to others' well-being became the driving force, a sustainable fuel for this journey. It wasn't about being a savior or a hero. It was about being a catalyst, a facilitator of positive change. The quiet pride of knowing that my actions had directly alleviated suffering, ignited hope, and fostered resilience was a reward far greater than any material gain. This project wasn't just about spending $1 million. It was about living 1,000,000 moments, each one a testament to the transformative power of kindness. It reshaped my identity, redefined my purpose, and left me with an unshakable belief in the inherent good that exists within us all, waiting to be unleashed. The journey, though nearing its financial conclusion, had irrevocably altered the trajectory of my life, leaving me with a profound, unyielding commitment to living a life of purpose-driven generosity. The culmination of this $1 million journey, therefore, isn't simply a ledger of expenditures, but a vibrant testament to the compounding power of intentional kindness. From the fleeting yet deeply moving encounter with Mrs. Eleanor Vance, whose dignity was upheld, and a small birthday cake secured, to the comprehensive revitalization of Havenwood, the overarching impact of this initiative has been nothing short of transformative. Each individual story, seemingly disparate, has woven itself into a larger narrative, illustrating how targeted acts of generosity, when strategically and empathetically applied, can collectively ignite profound societal change. It's an affirmation that even amidst widespread challenges, hope can be systematically cultivated, dignity restored, and futures reimagined. Connecting these individual threads, we saw how alleviating Chloe's financial burden didn't just save her from dropping out. It unleashed a highly educated professional into a society that desperately needs her intelligence and drive. By removing a seemingly small financial barrier, a lifetime of potential was unlocked, demonstrating how micro-investments in individual futures can yield macro dividends for the community at large. Similarly, the anonymous lifeline extended to Positive Haven didn't solely save the lives of countless animals. It empowered a dedicated team of caregivers, validating their tireless efforts and reminding them that their compassion was seen and supported. It underscored the interconnectedness of all life and how extending kindness beyond human boundaries enriches the broader ecosystem of empathy. And Maria Rodriguez's home renovation was more than just a structural repair. It was the restoration of a mother's peace of mind, a safe sanctuary for her children, and a powerful symbol of community solidarity that bolstered their emotional and psychological well-being. These acts, though diverse in their recipients and scope, shared a common denominator. They transcended mere financial transactions, embedding themselves as acts of profound human connection and affirmation. The most significant takeaway from this entire endeavor is the powerful realization that kindness is not merely transactional. It is fundamentally transformative, not just for the recipient, but equally, if not more so, for the giver. While the monetary value was significant, it was the emotional investment, the conscious intention behind each act, and the witness to their ripple effects that truly created change. The initial belief that $1 million could combat cynicism has been reaffirmed 1,000-fold. It has shown that the antidote to despair isn't necessarily massive, systemic overhauls, but often the consistent, heartfelt intervention of one human being in the life of another. This project was an intentional effort to inject concentrated doses of empathy and support into situations where they were most needed, proving that even in a world that often feels indifferent, active compassion can be a potent force for good. It's a demonstration that human systems, when infused with intentional benevolence, can transcend their own limitations and foster unexpected resilience and growth. Furthermore, this journey has illuminated that the profound satisfaction derived from these acts is not exclusive to those with considerable financial means. While my capacity allowed for larger-scale interventions, the underlying principle remains accessible to everyone. Kindness, at its core, doesn't require vast wealth. It demands a willing heart and creative thinking. It's about being present, observant, and responsive to the needs around you. It's about recognizing that every individual possesses the capacity to be a catalyst for positive change, to offer a helping hand, a kind word, or a moment of understanding. The feeling of purpose, the eradication of cynicism, and the deep, abiding joy that comes from contributing to another's well-being are universal commodities, available to all who choose to engage. This project, while framed by a large sum of money, ultimately serves as a living, breathing example that the spirit of generosity is boundless and its impact immeasurable, limited only by our willingness to open our hearts and creatively deploy whatever resources we have, be it time, attention, skill, or financial aid. Therefore, as you reflect on these stories, I encourage you to consider not the zeros in my budget, but the inherent human capacity we all share to uplift, to connect, and to leave a lasting positive imprint on the world, one thoughtful act at a time. As we conclude this exploration into the deliberate deployment of kindness, it is imperative to remember that the grand scale of my project is merely a framework for a universally accessible truth. The immense, often underestimated power of collective kindness. My journey, while demonstrating what significant resources can achieve, ultimately aims to inspire action on every level. You don't need $1 million to make 1,000,000 differences. The true transformative force lies not in the size of the gesture, but in the sincerity of the intent and the ripple effect it creates. Therefore, I implore you, the viewer, to move beyond being a passive observer and become an active participant in weaving a stronger, more compassionate global tapestry. Consider how you can integrate kindness into your daily life, not as a sporadic event, but as a consistent practice. It can be as simple as offering a genuine compliment to a colleague, holding a door open for a stranger, or letting someone go ahead of you in line when they seem rushed. These seemingly insignificant moments build connections, offering small but vital affirmations of humanity. Beyond these micro-interactions, think about how you can lend your unique talents and time, volunteering at a local food bank, spending an hour reading to children at a library, or donating blood are acts that, while requiring effort, offer profound rewards far beyond their immediate application. Supporting local businesses, for example, is another powerful act of kindness that directly impacts your community, assess economic well-being, and fosters a sense of shared prosperity. Choosing to shop at independent bookstores, dine at family-owned restaurants, or utilize local services isn't just a transaction. It's an investment in the dreams and livelihoods of your neighbors. Even a kind word offered without expectation of return can alter the trajectory of someone's day. Imagine the cumulative effect if each of us consciously sought out opportunities to uplift, to encourage, to simply acknowledge the inherent worth of those we encounter. Every single act of kindness, no matter how small, sends a clear signal. I see you, you matter, and there is goodness in the world. These individual threads of compassion, woven together, form a resilient fabric that can withstand the strains of cynicism and division. Don't wait for a grand opportunity. Seek the micro opportunities that present themselves every day. Your capacity for generosity, whether through time, attention, skill, or financial contribution, is limitless. The challenge is not finding the perfect act, but simply starting. Begin today to intentionally contribute your unique share to this larger positive tapestry, and watch how it transforms not just the